The morning light filtered through cheap Venetian blinds, casting prison bar shadows across the small kitchen table. Lydia Brennan stood at the counter, her navy scrub jacket hanging loose over tired shoulders, watching her 9-year-old daughter struggle with scrambled eggs that had gone from golden to charcoal sometime around sunrise. Scarlett looked up, spatula in hand, a streak of egg yolk across her cheek like war paint. I made breakfast. They're kind of burned. 7:15. 12 hours since Lydia had walked into Northern Virginia Medical Center. 12 hours of trauma codes and cardiac arrests and people who came in breathing and left in body bags. 12 hours of being someone else, someone simple, someone who had never learned to kill. She moved to the table, sat down, picked up a fork. The eggs tasted like carbon and love. Their perfect baby. But Scarlett's eyes were too sharp, too knowing for 9 years old. Mom, why do you look sad? Because 3 people died on my shift and I couldn't save them. Because every time I close my eyes, I see Fallujah. Because I'm 38 years old and I still wake up reaching for a rifle that hasn't been in my hands for 7 years. Just tired, baby. Long shift. She ate the burned eggs. All of them. Because that's what mothers do. They swallow the ash of their past and smile while it scorches their throat. Scarlett climbed onto the chair across from her legs, swinging, not quite reaching the floor. Mrs. Patterson says we need supplies for my science project, for the plant cell thing. Can we go to the store today? Lydia felt the familiar ache in her left shoulder, the one that never quite healed right after the Humvee rolled outside Ramadi. The doctors had put it back together with pins and prayers, but some breaks don't mend clean. Some fractures stay forever invisible fault lines waiting for the right pressure to split wide open. Yeah, baby, after I sleep a few hours, we'll go. After Scarlett left for school, Lydia stood in her bedroom doorway, staring at the closet she rarely opened all the way. At the cardboard box on the top shelf that she hadn't touched in 6 years. At the life she'd buried under civilian clothes and night shifts, and a daughter who knew her as mom, not staff sergeant. She reached up, pulled the box down. Dust motes danced in the morning light like tracer rounds. The photograph was right on top because it always was, because even when you bury the dead, they find ways to surface. 4 Marines in desert camouflage, Fallujah 2014. Dust and heat and the kind of exhaustion that becomes your baseline after 7 months in country. Lieutenant Marcus Webb, killed by sniper fire outside Mosul 2015. 26 years old, engaged to be married. Corporal Jennifer Dawson. Eid blast south of Baghdad 2014. Never made it to the medevac bird. Died in Lydia's arms, choking on blood, asking if her mom would be proud. Lance Corporal Tommy Reeves. Made it home. Survived the war. Put his service weapon in his mouth 2 years later in his parents' basement in Ohio because the war wouldn't let him go. 3 of the 4 people in that photograph were dead. Lydia was the only one left. She traced Jennifer's face with one finger, remembering the way her hands had felt doing chest compressions on pavement that radiated heat like a griddle. The way blood looked when it mixed with sand. The way she'd whispered, "Stay with me, Marine. Don't you dare quit on me," over and over like a prayer to a God who'd stopped listening years ago. She'd saved 3 other Marines that day, dragged them out of the kill zone while rounds sparked off the Humvee's armor, kept them breathing while her world turned to fire and shrapnel and the kind of chaos that makes time meaningless. Combat Action Ribbon, Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal, a medical discharge with honors and a handshake, and thank you for your service and good luck in the civilian world. Lydia shoved the photograph back in the box, slammed the closet door, stood there breathing hard, shoulder throbbing, hands shaking. That was then, she said to the empty room, to the ghost she'd tried to become. I'm just a nurse now. But ghosts don't stay buried. Not really. They just wait. 10:23 on a Saturday morning. Oakmont Plaza grocery store, the weekend crowd thick as blood in water. Lydia pushed her cart through produce mental shopping list, running on autopilot. Milk for Scarlett. Bread. Something for the science project, though. She wasn't entirely sure what plant cells needed besides poster board and a mother who could function on 3 hours of sleep. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, that particular frequency that lives somewhere between annoying and maddening. Muzak played something that might have been a pop song in another life, now reduced to elevator noise. Around her, people moved with the practiced efficiency of civilians who'd never had to check corners for threats, never had to assess every person as potential combatant or collateral damage. She envied them, their innocence, their ability to buy groceries without their hand drifting to a sidearm that wasn't there anymore. 4 aisles over past pasta and canned goods, A sound cut through the ambient noise like a knife through silk. Glass, shattering, then screaming. Every muscle in Lydia's body locked. Threat assessment instant automatic, a reflex burned so deep that 6 years of civilian life couldn't touch it. Multiple voices. Panic, adult male in distress based on pitch and timbre. Possible medical emergency, possible active shooter, possible she was moving before conscious thought caught up. The cart abandoned mid-aisle frozen peas and poster board forgotten. Her feet found pavement in a combat sprint, the kind you learn when seconds mean the difference between saving a life and zipping a body bag. The navy scrub jacket flew behind her like a cape, or maybe wings, or maybe just the last remnant of who she'd been before she'd tried to pretend otherwise. Aisle 7. Breakfast cereals. A crowd had formed, that terrible human circle of witnesses who see tragedy and freeze paralyzed by the bystander effect and their own mortality staring back at them. Lydia hit the edge of the crowd at full speed. They parted for her without understanding why, responding to something in her body language that spoke a language older than words. Authority, purpose, the kind of presence that commandeers space without asking permission. The man was down, elderly, 70, maybe 75, civilian clothes but medals pinned to his jacket like he couldn't let go of who he'd been any more than she could. Bronze Star, Purple Heart, Navy Cross. A warrior brought low between cornflakes and canned vegetables, his lips already turning blue, his chest still as stone. A younger man knelt beside him, hands hovering uselessly, panic in his eyes. He grabbed his chest and someone call 911, I don't know. CPR, I don't. Lydia dropped to her knees. Her hands went to the carotid pulse point, 2 fingers pressed firm against cooling skin. Nothing, no pulse, no respirations, pupils fixed and dilated, clinically dead. The world narrowed to a single point of focus. Everything else fell away. The crowd, the screaming, the music still playing like the universe hadn't noticed that a man's heart had stopped beating. None of it mattered. Nothing mattered except the mission. Call 911, she said, not loud, not panicked, command voice. The one that belonged to Staff Sergeant Brennan, the one she'd locked away with the medals and the photographs and the part of herself that knew how to function when everything went to hell. Now, the kneeling man scrambled for his phone. Lydia tilted the man's head back, opened his airway, checked for obstructions. Clear. She found the xiphoid process at the base of his sternum, measured 2 finger widths up, placed the heel of her palm in the center of his chest. Laced her other hand on top, locked her elbows, positioned her shoulders directly over her hands. Then she began compressions. Hard, fast, exactly 100 per minute. The rhythm of staying alive burned into her muscle memory from training that felt like another lifetime. 2 inches deep, feeling his sternum compress, feeling ribs flex under her palms. The slight crack that meant cartilage separating, which was normal, which was expected. Which meant she was doing it right. Better broken ribs than a dead patient. 1, 2, 3, 4. She counted in her head, keeping rhythm, keeping pace. 10, 15, 20. Her arms were already burning. CPR is exhausting, takes every bit of strength and endurance you have, but her technique never wavered. 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. She stopped compressions, tilted his head back, pinched his nose, sealed her mouth over his. 2 rescue breaths, watching his chest rise with each one. Airway patent, lungs accepting air. Back to compressions immediately. No hesitation, no pause. Because every second without oxygen meant brain cells dying, meant the difference between recovery and vegetative state, meant the Humvee. Fallujah. Corporal Dawson's chest torn open by shrapnel, blood everywhere. Lydia straddling her in the back of a moving vehicle while mortars fell and dust choked the air. 30 compressions. 2 breaths, 30 compressions. Dawson's eyes going distant, the light starting to fade. Ma'am, can you hear me? Lydia blinked. The grocery store snapped back into focus. The man who'd been kneeling stood now, phone pressed to his ear. Yes, operator, she's doing CPR. I don't know who she is. She just started. Time me, Lydia said, not stopping compressions. Tell me when 2 minutes are up, and talk to him. Keep talking to him. The man's eyes went wide, but he nodded, crouched down close to the unconscious man's face. You're gonna be okay, brother. She's got you. You're gonna make it. Stay with me. Stay with me. The words hit Lydia like a fist to the sternum. How many times had she said those exact words in the Humvee in the field hospital, on dusty roads where young Marines bled out because the medevac took too long, or the wounds were too catastrophic, or God just decided it was their time? How many times had those words been the last thing someone heard before the darkness took them? 1 minute of compressions. Her shoulder screamed. The old shoulder injury throbbed pins and scar tissue protesting the strain. She ignored it. Pain was information. Information could be processed later. Right now there was only the rhythm. 30 compressions, 2 breaths, 30 compressions, 2 breaths, the mechanical precision of it, the relentless repetition. The only thing standing between this man and death. 1 minute 30 seconds. Sweat beaded on her forehead. A strand of dark hair fell across her face. She didn't brush it away. Couldn't afford to break rhythm. Couldn't afford to stop. Because stopping meant death, and death was not acceptable. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she was aware of the crowd. Phones out recording, people crying, someone praying. But it was all background noise, static, irrelevant data filtered out by a combat-trained brain that knew how to function in chaos. 2 minutes. Her arms trembled. Her muscles burned. But her pace never slowed, never wavered. Because this is what Marines do. They fight when everyone else has given up. They refuse to surrender. They don't stop until there's nothing left to fight for. The man's metals pressed into the linoleum beneath him with each compression. Bronze Star, Purple Heart, Navy Cross, a lifetime of service reduced to metal and ribbon, while a stranger fought to keep his heart beating. 2 minutes 30 seconds. Lydia's breath came hard now. CPR is an athletic event, requires the same cardiovascular endurance as running sprints. Her heart hammered, her muscles screamed. But her hands never stopped moving. 30 compressions, 2 breaths, 30 compressions, 2 breaths. She could feel his ribs flexing with each compression, could feel the sternum giving under her palms, could hear the slight wheeze as air moved in and out of his lungs with each rescue breath. But no pulse. Not yet. She pressed harder, faster, counting, always counting. That merciless arithmetic of survival. 30 compressions equals 15 seconds. 2 breaths equals 5 seconds. 20 seconds per cycle. 3 cycles per minute. Keep going. Don't stop. Never stop. 3 minutes. And then without thinking, without planning, words escaped her lips, pulled from some deep place where her service still lived, where Afghanistan still existed, where she was still Staff Sergeant Brennan and not just Lydia, the night shift nurse. "Stay with me, Marine," she said it quietly, fiercely. The same way she'd said it on a Humvee floor in Fallujah when Corporal Dawson's heart had stopped from shock and blood loss. "Stay with me, Marine." The same way she'd said it to Lance Corporal Reeves when shrapnel had torn through his chest and his eyes had started to go distant. "Don't you dare quit on me." Core language, battlefield language. The words you say when death is closing in and the only thing keeping someone alive is another Marine refusing to let them go. In the crowd, a woman turned to the person beside her. Did she just call him Marine? But Lydia didn't hear, didn't register her own words. Her conscious mind was gone. Only training remained, only the mission. 3 minutes, 30 seconds. Sirens in the distance growing louder. Help was coming, but help wasn't here yet, and this man's brain was being starved of oxygen, and every second mattered in 4 minutes. She was in Afghanistan now, not physically but mentally. The grocery store had become the Humvee. The fluorescent lights had become Desert Sun. The crowd had become her unit Marines watching her work, trusting her, believing she could save the dying. The memory surfaced unbidden. Corporal Austin Whitmore. IED blast, legs shattered, femoral artery severed, heart stopping from hypovolemic shock. Lydia straddling him in the back of a moving Humvee, hands on his chest, counting, compressing, refusing to let him die. "Stay with me, Marine. Don't you dare leave me. Stay with me." And he had stayed. Because sometimes will matters more than medicine. Sometimes refusing to accept death is enough to keep it at bay. 4 minutes, 30 seconds. The man's face had gone from pale to ashen to something worse. Gray, the color of death approaching. But Lydia kept going because that's what you do. You fight until there's nothing left to fight for. The automatic doors burst open. Paramedics rushed in. 2 of them equipment and authority, and the cavalry arriving at last. The lead paramedic, mid-40s, kind eyes, 15 years of this, written in the lines of his face, saw the woman doing CPR and recognized immediately. Professional technique, perfect form. Whoever she was, she knew what she was doing. "Keep going," he said, setting up equipment around her. "We'll work around you." His partner attached monitor leads to the man's chest, working around Lydia's hands. The defibrillator powered on with its characteristic high-pitched whine. Lydia kept going. 30 compressions, 2 breaths, 30 compressions. Her world had narrowed to this and only this. The rise and fall of a chest that wouldn't rise on its own. The compression of a heart that wouldn't beat without her hands. The lead paramedic knelt beside her. "I need a report." Lydia's voice came out steady despite her exhaustion. Professional, complete. The kind of handoff you give when lives depend on clear communication. Male, approximately 70. Sudden cardiac arrest. Witness collapse. CPR initiated immediately. 5 minutes of compressions. No pulse. No spontaneous respirations. The paramedic nodded recognition and respect in his eyes. This wasn't her first rodeo. "Good work. We'll take over on my count. 3, 2, 1, clear." Lydia pulled back. For the first time in 5 minutes, her hands stopped moving. They dropped to her sides, shaking, burning. She could barely feel them. Her arms were lead weights. Her shoulders screamed where the old injury lived. The paramedic took over compressions while his partner prepared the defibrillator. The monitor showed ventricular fibrillation, the heart trying to beat but unable to organize itself. Shockable rhythm. Charged to 200 joules. The defibrillator whined louder. "Charged. Everyone clear. Everyone's..." The paramedic lifted his hands from the man's chest. The shock delivered. The man's body jerked, muscles contracting from the electrical current coursing through his heart. Everyone held their breath. The monitor beeped once, twice. A weak, irregular rhythm appeared on the screen. The paramedic's fingers went to the carotid pulse. His eyes met his partner's. "We've got a pulse. Weak and irregular, but it's there." The crowd exhaled. Some started crying. Relief crashed over them like a wave breaking on shore. Lydia sat back on her heels. Her legs were unsteady. Her hands shook uncontrollably now that the adrenaline was fading. She'd done this before the crash after combat, the physiological aftermath of maximum physical exertion and maximum emotional intensity. The veteran who'd been timing her gripped her shoulder. "You did it. You brought him back." Lydia couldn't speak, could only watch as the paramedics worked with practiced efficiency. Force started, oxygen mask applied, vital signs assessed, the machinery of emergency medicine doing what it did best. The lead paramedic looked at her. "You saved his life. What's your name?" Lydia stood. Her legs barely supported her weight. "It doesn't matter." The paramedic pulled out a clipboard. "We need a name for the report." But Lydia was already backing away, pushing through the crowd. "Just take care of him. He needs a cardiac catheterization lab. Probable STEMI. Don't waste time." "Wait, we need..." But Lydia didn't stop. She pushed through the circle of onlookers, past the shocked shoppers, past the shattered jars of sauce, still spreading red across white linoleum like blood on sand. Past her abandoned shopping cart with its frozen peas and poster board, she walked quickly toward the exit. Not running. That would draw attention. But moving with purpose, with the need to escape before anyone could ask more questions. Before anyone could dig deeper into who she was and what she'd been. Behind her, the paramedics loaded the man onto the gurney, securing straps, adjusting oxygen, maintaining that fragile thread of life Lydia had refused to let break. The lead paramedic turned to the veteran. Who was she? The veteran shook his head. "I don't know. She just appeared and started working." The paramedic looked at the crowd. "Anyone know her name?" Heads shaking, shrugs, confusion. The paramedic turned to his partner. Female, late 30s, dark hair, blue scrub jacket, medical training, obviously professional level. Get a description for the report. But Lydia was already in the parking lot. She reached her car, fumbled her keys, dropped them, picked them up with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Got the door open, sat in the driver's seat, left the door open because she couldn't handle the enclosed space right now, gulped air. The adrenaline crash hit like a freight train. Her hands trembled violently. Her breath came in short gasps. Not panic, just the physiological aftermath of 5 minutes of maximum physical exertion and emotional intensity. She had done this before. The crash after combat, after saving lives under fire, after watching lives slip away despite everything she did. But this was different. This was supposed to be over. This part of her life was supposed to be buried. Staff Sergeant Lydia Brennan didn't exist anymore. She was just a nurse, just a single mom buying groceries on a Saturday morning, except she had just performed combat-level CPR in a grocery store and spoken the language she'd sworn to leave behind. "Stay with me, Marine." Those words, that phrase, the muscle memory that wouldn't stay buried no matter how hard she tried. Lydia closed her eyes, saw Corporal Dawson bleeding out in the Humvee, saw Lance Corporal Reeves' chest torn open by shrapnel. Saw Lieutenant Webb taking his last breath after the sniper round found its mark. Saw all the faces she couldn't save. All the Marines who had died despite her best efforts. All the guilt she carried like shrapnel embedded too deep to remove. And now she had saved one more. One stranger whose name she didn't even know. She should feel good about that. Should feel proud. But all she felt was exposed. Like a wound reopened. Like a past that refused to stay past. She started the car, pulled out of the parking space. In her rearview mirror, the ambulance was leaving, lights flashing, sirens wailing, taking that man to the hospital, to the cardiac catheterization lab, to doctors who would place stents and administer medications and hopefully keep him alive. Lydia drove toward home, realized she had forgotten the groceries, the milk, the bread, the supplies for Scarlett's science project. Realized she had just saved a stranger's life and abandoned her shopping cart and disappeared without giving her name. Just like she had done 6 years ago when she had left the Marine Corps, turned in her rifle, removed her uniform, walked away without looking back. She thought she had escaped, thought she could be someone else, someone normal. But muscle memory doesn't lie, training doesn't fade. And who you are in your hardest moments stays with you forever, no matter how hard you try to bury it. Her phone buzzed, text from Mrs. Chen next door watching Scarlett for the morning. Scarlett asking when you'll be back. Everything okay? Lydia typed with shaking hands. On my way. Be there in 10 minutes. She drove through Arlington streets, past strip malls and coffee shops and the ordinary landscape of civilian life. But in her head, she was still in that grocery store. Still counting compressions, still fighting death, still whispering words she thought she had left behind. Stay with me, Marine. What Lydia didn't know, what she couldn't possibly imagine as she drove home to her daughter and her ordinary life, what would only become clear in the days ahead was that those 4 words had been heard. A witness in the crowd had caught them, had found them strange, had remembered them. And those 4 words would set in motion a search that would pull Lydia back into a world she thought she had escaped forever. Because the man whose heart she had restarted was not just any stranger. He was General Nathaniel Blackwood, 4-star Marine, 4 decades of service. A man who commanded respect and loyalty and resources. And when he woke up 3 days later in a hospital bed, when he learned that someone had saved his life and disappeared, when he discovered those 4 words that held the key to everything, he would move heaven and earth to find her. Marines don't leave Marines behind, not on battlefields, not in gratitude, not ever. 3 days passed before Nathaniel Blackwood opened his eyes again. 3 days of machines breathing for him, of his heart beating under chemical assistance, of Eleanor sitting vigil beside a bed in the cardiac intensive care unit holding his hand and whispering prayers she hadn't spoken since Desert Storm when she was 41 and waiting for letters that sometimes didn't come. 3 days of their daughters flying in from across the country, of grandchildren kept in the waiting room because the sight of their grandfather with tubes down his throat would give them nightmares for years. 3 days of doctors using words like massive myocardial infarction and left anterior descending artery, and if he makes it through the next 48 hours. On the 3rd day, Nathaniel's eyes opened. The world came back slowly in pieces like a photograph developing in a dark room. First the beeping, steady rhythmic electronic, not gunfire. Not mortars, something else. Second the smell, antiseptic and plastic and the particular staleness of recycled air. Hospital smell. He knew it from visits to wounded Marines, from standing at bedsides and pinning medals on young men who would never walk again. Third the pain, dull ache in his chest, soreness in his throat like someone had shoved a pipe down it, weakness in every muscle. Fourth, Eleanor's face. She was sitting in a chair pulled close to his bed, her head resting on her arms on the mattress beside him. Asleep, gray hair falling across her face, lines of exhaustion etched deeper than they should be. Nathaniel tried to speak. His throat wouldn't work. Just a dry rasp that made Eleanor's eyes snap open. She saw him looking at her, and her face transformed. Relief and joy and fear all compressed into a single expression that said everything words couldn't. You're awake. Her voice broke on the words. Oh God, Nate, you're awake. She reached for the call button, pressed it repeatedly, then turned back to him and took his hand in both of hers and pressed it against her cheek and cried. Nathaniel wanted to tell her he was okay, wanted to squeeze her hand, but his body wouldn't respond the way his mind commanded. He just lay there weak and confused while Eleanor cried and nurses rushed in and machines beeped faster. Where he managed the single word. Throat raw. Voice he didn't recognize. Northern Virginia Medical Center. Eleanor wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. You had a heart attack at the store. You collapsed. You... She couldn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. He understood what she wasn't saying. If PR hadn't started immediately, he would be dead. How long were you? 3 days. You've been unconscious for 3 days. She squeezed his hand harder, like she was afraid he might slip away again if she let go. The doctor entered. Dr. Rebecca Thornton, mid-50s, wearing the calm professional expression that doctors learn to maintain even when delivering terrible news. General Blackwood. She moved to the bedside, checked monitors with practiced efficiency. Welcome back. You gave us quite a scare. What happened? Dr. Thornton pulled up a stool, sat down at eye level with him. The fact that she sat instead of standing told him everything he needed to know about the severity. You suffered a massive myocardial infarction. Heart attack. The left anterior descending artery was 95% occluded. Completely blocked blood flow to a significant portion of your heart muscle. Nathaniel processed this information the way he had once processed tactical briefings, assessing, analyzing, understanding the severity without flinching from it. Prognosis. You're alive. That's the good news. Dr. Thornton's expression softened slightly. We placed 2 stents, restored blood flow. The damage to your heart muscle was significant, but you're stable now. With medication and cardiac rehabilitation, you can recover. She paused. The pause that meant there was more. The pause that meant the hard part was coming. But you were clinically dead for approximately 4 minutes. No pulse, no respirations. If someone hadn't performed CPR immediately and correctly, you wouldn't have survived. Nathaniel looked at Eleanor. Who? That's what we've been trying to figure out. Eleanor's voice carried frustration mixed with gratitude. The paramedics said a bystander performed CPR. A woman, but she didn't stay. No one got her name. A woman. Nathaniel's mind tried to sort through the fragments of memory. The falling, the darkness. Had there been hands on his chest? Had there been a voice he couldn't remember? Just the pain and then nothing, and then waking up here with tubes and wires and the knowledge that he should be dead, but wasn't. Dr. Thornton stood. I'll let you rest. Your family can visit briefly, but you need to conserve your strength. Recovery from this type of cardiac event takes time. She left. Eleanor pulled her chair closer. Their daughters appeared in the doorway, Jennifer and Catherine, both with red eyes from days of crying and waiting and not knowing. Nathaniel looked at his wife, at his daughters, at the life he had almost lost in a grocery store buying cornflakes. I need to find her. Eleanor blinked. What? The woman. Who did CPR? I need to thank her. Nate, you just woke up. You need to rest. His hand tightened on hers, stronger now, the fog clearing, the general who had spent decades solving impossible problems activating despite the weakness in his body. I need to find her, Eleanor. I owe her my life. Jennifer stepped into the room. Dad, we tried. We called the store. We talked to the manager. They have security footage, but the quality is terrible. You can see someone doing CPR, but you can't see her face. Nathaniel's eyes sharpened, the strategic mind engaging. Get Marcus. Marcus Hayes, your old aide. Nathaniel nodded. Tell him I need to see him today. Dad, you need to rest. I will rest after I find her. His voice was getting stronger, the rawness fading. This is important, Jennifer. More important than rest. Eleanor studied his face, saw the determination she had seen so many times over 47 years of marriage. The look that meant arguing would be pointless. I'll call him. 6 hours later, Colonel Marcus Hayes sat in a chair beside Nathaniel's hospital bed. Retired now 62 years old, but still moving with the bearing of an active duty Marine. They had served together in Desert Storm. Marcus had been Nathaniel's aide for 3 years, had learned how Nathaniel thought, how he operated, how he turned impossible missions into completed objectives. Talk to me, sir. Nathaniel laid out what he knew, which was almost nothing. Woman, civilian, medical training. Performed CPR at Oakmont Plaza. Disappeared before paramedics could get information. You want me to find her? I want you to move heaven and earth to find her. Marcus pulled out a small notebook, started writing. Old school, no tablets, no phones, just pen and paper in the methodical approach of a man who built a career on attention to detail. What do we know? Description. Nathaniel shook his head. I was unconscious, but the paramedics saw her. The store manager saw her. Witnesses saw her. Someone knows something. I'll start with the paramedics, get a description, then the store, security footage even if it's bad, then witnesses. Marcus looked up from his notebook. Someone always sees something. Nathaniel nodded. Report back to me daily. This is priority 1. Marcus stood, came to attention, said the words they had said to each other 1,000 times over 3 decades of service. Semper Fi, sir. Semper Fi, Marcus. Young Colonel Hayes made his first call from the hospital parking lot. Jake Morrison, lead paramedic on the Oakmont Plaza call. Morrison remembered the incident clearly. Remembered the woman. Female late 30s, I'd guess. Dark hair pulled back, athletic build, maybe 5'6", 5'7". She was wearing a blue scrub jacket, like hospital staff wear. But it was Saturday morning. She was shopping, off duty. What else? Her technique. Morrison's voice carried professional respect. It was perfect. Not good, not adequate. Perfect. Hand placement exact. Depth and rate perfect. She gave me a medical report that was better than some EMTs I work with. Used terminology that civilians don't know. What terminology? She told me the patient needed a cardiac catheterization lab. Probable STEMI, that's ST elevation myocardial infarction. Not language you pick up from a CPR class. So she has medical training, professional level. Look, I've been doing this 15 years. I've seen a lot of bystander CPR. This wasn't bystander level. This was someone who's done this before, multiple times, under pressure. She knew exactly what she was doing. Anything else? She disappeared. I turned to grab my clipboard, and when I looked back, she was gone, vanished into the crowd. I asked around. Nobody knew her name. Nobody had seen where she went. Marcus made notes. What about her vehicle license plate? I don't know. Morrison sounded frustrated. It all happened so fast. We were focused on the patient. By the time we thought to get more information, she was already gone. If you remember anything else, call me. Marcus gave him a number. Anything at all. Next call, Tom Harrison, Oakmont Plaza manager. Harrison pulled the security footage, gave Marcus access to watch it in the store's back office. Grainy black and white video from cameras that should have been upgraded a decade ago. Marcus watched the collapse. Watched Nathaniel go down. Watched the crowd form. Then watched a figure sprint into frame from the left side of the screen. Blue jacket visible even in black and white. Dark hair, moving with purpose and speed that spoke of training of someone who knew how to run toward danger instead of away from it. Marcus watched her drop to her knees, watched her hands move to Nathaniel's chest, watched her perform CPR with textbook precision, but the angle was wrong. The crowd blocked most of the view, and when she stood up afterward, her face was obscured by other shoppers. Marcus ran the footage back, watched it again and again, looking for any detail that might help. Blue scrub jacket, that meant medical field. Nurse, doctor, medical tech something. Athletic build. Fast sprint. Physical fitness level suggested active lifestyle. Maybe military background. Maybe just someone who took care of themselves, but it wasn't enough. Not enough to identify her in a city of 600,000 people. Marcus drove to the hospital that night, found Nathaniel sitting up in bed, color better, strength returning. Eleanor had gone home to shower and sleep after 3 days of vigil. What do you have? Marcus laid out everything. Paramedic description, security footage, the blue scrub jacket detail. So she works in healthcare. Nathaniel's mind was already working the problem, making connections, narrowing possibilities. Local hospital, medical center, clinic. Marcus hesitated. Sir, that's dozens of medical facilities in Northern Virginia. Thousands of healthcare workers. And we don't even know for certain she works locally. She could have been visiting. Could have been from anywhere. Start local. Nathaniel's voice carried the command authority that 40 years of service had ingrained. Call every hospital in a 20-mile radius. Ask if they have nurses or medical staff who were off duty Saturday morning, who might have been shopping at Oakmont Plaza. Marcus made notes. That's a lot of phone calls. Then make a lot of phone calls. Nathaniel reached for his phone, started scrolling through contacts. I know people. We'll get you help. Over the next week, Marcus coordinated what became an increasingly elaborate search operation. Other retired Marines joined in, officers Nathaniel had served with. Enlisted personnel who owed him favors. A network built over 4 decades activating for a single mission. Find the woman who saved the general's life. They called hospitals, nursing agencies, medical staffing companies. Do you have female employees, late 30s, dark hair, who might have been shopping at Oakmont Plaza on Saturday, October 14th? Some facilities were helpful. Others cited privacy regulations. None had useful information. They interviewed witnesses. The young mother who had pulled her child away. The stock boy who had called 911. The veteran who had knelt beside Nathaniel trying to remember his CPR training. Everyone remembered the woman. No one knew her name. She just appeared, the veteran told Marcus, like she materialized out of nowhere. Started working, saved his life, then disappeared like a ghost. Dead end after dead end. Nathaniel grew increasingly frustrated, spent hours in his hospital bed making phone calls, contacting people he hadn't spoken to in years, pulling strings, calling in favors. Eleanor watched him obsess, watched his blood pressure climb, watched the cardiac monitors spike when he got agitated. Nate, you need to let this go. You're going to make yourself sick. I can't let it go. Why, why does it matter so much? Nathaniel looked at his wife, at the woman who had stood beside him through 3 wars and 4 decades of service, who had raised their daughters mostly alone during his deployments, who had earned every gray hair and every worry line. Because she saved me, because I owe her my life, because he struggled to articulate what he felt. Something deeper than gratitude, something that lived in the core of who he was. Because Marines don't leave Marines behind. Eleanor sat down on the edge of his bed. What makes you think she's a Marine? Nathaniel didn't answer directly. Couldn't explain the feeling in his gut, the sense that this woman was more than just a skilled civilian, that there was something else, something he was missing. 2 weeks after the heart attack, Nathaniel was transferred to a cardiac rehabilitation facility. Physical therapy, supervised exercise, medication management, the slow, frustrating process of teaching his damaged heart to work again. He continued the search from his new room, made calls between physical therapy sessions, coordinated with Marcus and the growing team of volunteers helping with the investigation. 47 phone calls over 3 weeks. That was what it took. 47 conversations with hospital administrators and VA officials and veteran service organizations and military personnel offices. 47 threads pulled in an increasingly complex web. And then on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks after his heart had stopped in a grocery store, the breakthrough came from the most unlikely source. Nathaniel's phone rang. Northern Virginia Medical Center Volunteer Coordinator. General Blackwood, this is Linda Martinez. I coordinate volunteers here at the hospital. A woman called. She was at Oakmont Plaza. She was there when you collapsed. She heard something, and it's been bothering her. She finally worked up the courage to call. Nathaniel sat up straighter, ignoring the pull of still healing incisions. What did she hear? She'd rather tell you in person. Can she come see you this afternoon? 2 hours later, Patricia Hughes sat in a chair in Nathaniel's room, nervous, clutching her purse, feeling slightly ridiculous for making such a big deal out of something that was probably nothing. Nathaniel leaned forward. Mrs. Hughes, thank you for coming. Please tell me what you heard. Patricia took a breath. I was there at the store. I saw you collapse. I saw the woman doing CPR. I was standing close, maybe 10 feet away, and she said something while she was doing CPR. I heard her say it. It seemed odd at the time, but with everything happening so fast, I didn't think much of it. But it's been bothering me, so I called. What did she say? Patricia met his eyes. Stay with me, Marine. The words hit Nathaniel like a physical force. Silence filled the room. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair. His heart rate monitor beeped faster. Say that again. She said, stay with me, Marine. Don't you dare quit on me. Patricia spoke slowly, clearly. I remember because I thought it was strange. She was wearing scrubs like a nurse, but she called you Marine like she knew you or like she was one herself. Nathaniel couldn't breathe, not from his damaged heart, from recognition, from understanding. Stay with me, Marine. That wasn't civilian language. That wasn't something you picked up from television or medical school. That was core language. That was what Marines said to each other in firefights, in casualty collection points, when everything was going to hell and the only thing keeping someone alive was another Marine refusing to let them go. She served. The words were barely a whisper. The woman who saved me. She's Marine Corps. Patricia looked uncertain. I don't know. I just know what I heard. Nathaniel grabbed his phone, called Marcus. His hands were shaking. Not from weakness, from excitement, from the first real lead they'd gotten in 3 weeks. Marcus, I know how to find her. Sir, she's one of us. She's Marine Corps. I'm certain of it. How do you know? Because a witness heard her say, stay with me, Marine, while she was doing CPR. Nathaniel's voice was stronger now, more certain than it had been since he'd woken up. That's not civilian language. That's what we say to each other, what we've always said to each other. Marcus was quiet for a moment, processing. Then his voice came back sharp and focused. If she's Marine Corps, we can find her, personnel records, service history, current location. Nathaniel rattled off parameters like he was planning a military operation, because in a way he was. Female, late 30s, medical specialty, discharged in the last 10 years. Living in Northern Virginia. I'll start with Marine Corps Personnel Command at Quantico. Cross-reference with VAA healthcare enrollment, with nursing licenses, with hospital employment databases. That's going to take time, sir. Then start now. Patricia left shortly after. Nathaniel thanked her profusely, told her she had just given him the key to everything. He sat alone in his room afterward, heart monitor beeping steadily, the miracle of modern medicine keeping him alive so he could complete this mission. Stay with me, Marine. Those words meant everything. Meant she had stood where he had stood, sworn the same oath, lived by the same code. Somewhere out there was a woman who had saved his life, a woman who spoke his language, who understood what it meant to fight death and refuse to surrender. And he was going to find her. Marines don't leave Marines behind, not in combat zones, not in hospitals, not in gratitude. The search intensified. Marcus contacted Marine Corps Personnel Command, requested database access. Former Marines female medical occupational specialty, discharged between 2015 and 2020. Geographic location, Northern Virginia area. The database returned 38 names. Marcus started making calls, verifying current employment, cross-referencing with physical descriptions from the paramedic and witnesses. Too old, wrong specialty, wrong location, moved out of state. One by one, the names were eliminated. Nathaniel worked his own channels. Called friends still on active duty, asked them to run queries through military databases, to check with VA hospitals, to look for any female Marine with combat medical experience now working in civilian healthcare. The network expanded, former subordinates across the country helping, making calls, sending emails, following leads, day after day, name after name. Most led nowhere, but Nathaniel kept pushing, kept calling, kept searching, because this was what he did, this was who he was. A Marine who didn't quit, who didn't accept failure, who completed the mission no matter how impossible it seemed. 3 weeks and 56 phone calls after Patricia Hugh had come forward, Marcus called with news. Sir, I think I found her. Nathaniel's heart rate spiked. The monitor beside his bed beeped faster. Talk to me. Staff Sergeant Lydia Marie Brennan, United States Marine Corps, enlisted 2010, discharged 2017. Medical discharge following vehicle rollover shoulder injury. 2 tours, Iraq. Field medical specialist. Currently employed at Northern Virginia Medical Center. Night shift. Emergency department. Nathaniel closed his eyes, let the information wash over him. He had found her. After 3 weeks of searching, after 56 phone calls and countless dead ends, and more frustration than he'd felt since Desert Storm, he had found her. Where is she now? Works night shift, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. She's probably sleeping right now. Send me everything you have. Service record, current contact information. Everything. Already in your email, sir. Nathaniel opened his laptop, hands shaking slightly as he pulled up the files Marcus had sent. Service record, dates of service, deployments, awards and commendations, combat action ribbon, Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal, incident report from Fallujah, Iraq 2014, enemy contact, 3 wounded Marines. Staff Sergeant Brennan engaged enemy forces while rendering medical aid. Continued treatment under direct fire. All 3 casualties survived. Nathaniel read it twice, then 3 times. This woman had run through gunfire to save wounded Marines, had worked on them while bullets sparked off rocks around her position, had kept them alive under impossible conditions. And 6 years later, she had been shopping for groceries when his heart stopped. And all that training had come flooding back. He opened the photograph file, service photo, Lydia Brennan in dress blues, younger, harder, Staff Sergeant chevrons on her collar. This was her. He knew it with absolute certainty. This was the woman who had saved his life. He found the contact information, home address in Alexandria, phone number listed as emergency contact on her hospital employment file. He could call her right now, could thank her, could tell her what her actions meant, but a phone call wasn't enough. This woman had given him his life back, had given him more time with Eleanor, more time with his daughters and grandchildren, more time to exist in a world he had almost left. A phone call couldn't repay that. Nathaniel thought about what he could do, what would be appropriate, what would honor this Marine the way she deserved to be honored. And slowly an idea began to form. The call came at 2:17 in the morning, which was the darkest part of Lydia Brennan's world. The hour when the emergency room finally quieted after the evening rush. When the drunk drivers had either made it home or crashed. When the chest pains had resolved or progressed to full arrests. When the city held its breath before dawn came and started the cycle again. Lydia was finishing patient charts in the staff lounge, her third cup of coffee gone cold beside the laptop. 7 years at Northern Virginia Medical Center. 7 years of night shifts in fluorescent lights and saving strangers who never learned her name. 7 years of being invisible, which was exactly how she wanted it. Her supervisor appeared in the doorway holding a slip of paper like it contained a diagnosis she didn't want to deliver. "Brennan, there's a message for you." Messages during shift were rare, usually meant emergency, Scarlett sick at the neighbors, the landlord with a crisis, her beat-up Honda finally giving up in the parking lot. But the supervisor's face held something else. Uncertainty, maybe concern. Lydia took the paper. Read it once. The words made sense individually but refused to form meaning when strung together. General Nathaniel Blackwood requests contact regarding incident at Oakmont Plaza. Please call 703-5550-147. The floor dropped out from under her. 7 years of careful separation. Of keeping Staff Sergeant Brennan buried with the medals and the photographs and the parts of herself that knew how to kill. 7 years of being just Lydia, just a nurse, just a single mom who worked nights and made breakfast and helped with homework. 7 years destroyed by a slip of paper and 10 words. "He found me." "You okay?" The supervisor was watching her closely. "You just went completely white." Lydia forced her face into something resembling calm. The mask she'd perfected over 7 years of hiding. "I'm fine, just unexpected. Thanks." She walked to the locker room on autopilot, legs moving, lungs breathing, heart beating. But her mind was 3 weeks in the past, kneeling on supermarket linoleum, hands on an old man's chest, words escaping her lips that should have stayed buried forever. "Stay with me, Marine." She sat on the bench between rows of metal lockers, the same bench where she'd sat 7 years ago after her discharge, where she'd changed out of utilities for the last time, where she'd stuffed her uniform in a duffel bag and walked away from everything she'd been. The slip of paper trembled in her hands. She could ignore it, could throw it away, could pretend the message never arrived, could keep living her invisible life where nobody asked about her shoulder scar or why she sometimes flinched at loud noises or what made her wake up screaming about Humvees and sand and blood that wouldn't stop flowing. Except generals didn't give up, Marines didn't forget, and debts like the one she owed required payment whether you wanted to collect or not. Her phone felt like it weighed 50 pounds as she pulled it from her pocket. The number on the paper blurred. She blinked, focused, dialed before she could change her mind. 2 rings, then a voice, deep, steady, the kind of voice that had given orders in combat zones and expected them to be followed. "General Blackwood." Lydia's throat closed. She couldn't speak. 7 years since she'd heard that particular tone. Command authority. The sound of someone who'd spent 40 years making life and death decisions and living with the consequences. "Hello," a pause. "Is someone there?" "Sir." The word came out rough, wrong. "This is Lydia Brennan. I received a message that you wanted to speak with me." Silence on the other end, long enough that she thought maybe the call had dropped. Then his voice came back softer, but no less certain. "Staff Sergeant Brennan, thank you for calling." Another pause, heavier this time. "Thank you for saving my life." The rank hit her like a fist to the sternum. Staff Sergeant. She hadn't been called that in 7 years. Had spent 7 years being just Lydia, just a nurse, just a nobody who clocked in and clocked out and tried desperately to forget she'd ever been someone who mattered. "Sir, with respect, I'm not active duty anymore. I'm just a civilian nurse who happened to know CPR. You did what a Marine would do." His voice was gentle but firm, leaving no room for argument. "A witness heard you say something while you were doing compressions. 4 words. Stay with me, Marine. Don't you dare quit on me." The air left Lydia's lungs. Those 4 words, the ones that had slipped out when her guard was down. When muscle memory had taken over and Staff Sergeant Brennan had surfaced from whatever grave civilian Lydia had tried to bury her in. "That's how I found you," Nathaniel continued. "That's how I know who you really are. Those aren't words you learn in a CPR class, Staff Sergeant. Those are words Marines say to each other when everything's falling apart and the only thing keeping someone alive is another Marine refusing to let go." Lydia's hand tightened on the phone. She wanted to deny it. to claim it was just coincidence, just words that came to her in the moment. But generals didn't spend 3 weeks searching for someone based on coincidence. I didn't mean to say that, sir. I'm glad you did, because it led me to you, and I have a request. She closed her eyes, knew what was coming, could feel it in the way he was building to something. The careful construction of a man who'd learned how to get people to do things they didn't want to do. There's a ceremony, Nathaniel said, 2 weeks from now, Marine Corps Reserve Center in Arlington. I need you there. Sir, I don't attend military events anymore. I left that life behind when I took off the uniform 7 years ago. Once a Marine, always a Marine, Staff Sergeant. It wasn't a platitude. It was a statement of fact delivered with the weight of someone who'd lived that truth for 4 decades, who'd bled for it, who'd watched others die for it. Lydia stood, started pacing the small locker room. Her reflection caught in the mirror mounted on the far wall. Navy scrubs rumpled from 12 hours of work, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, face that looked older than 38, worn down by night shifts and memories that wouldn't stay buried. Sir, I have a daughter. I work night shifts. I'm not that person anymore. I'm not asking Staff Sergeant Brennan to come, Nathaniel said quietly. I'm asking Lydia, the woman who saved my life, the nurse who runs toward emergencies instead of away from them, the mother who works nights so she can be home when her daughter gets off school. The words found cracks in her armor she didn't know existed. Please, he added, I'm asking you as a fellow Marine, as someone whose life you gave back, as a father and grandfather who wants more time with his family because of you. Please. The word hung between them, not an order, a request, which somehow made it impossible to refuse. Lydia thought about Scarlett, about her carefully maintained routine, about how much easier it would be to just say no, to stay invisible, to keep Staff Sergeant Brennan buried where she belonged. But Marines don't say no when asked, not when it matters, not when the request comes from someone who understands what the uniform meant. Yes, sir, I'll be there. She hung up before he could say anything else, before she could change her mind, sat on the bench with her phone in her hand and the knowledge that she'd just agreed to walk back into a world she'd spent 7 years escaping. The locker room felt too small, the walls too close. She stood, paced, tried to breathe through the panic rising in her chest. A photograph was taped inside her locker. Scarlett at her 9th birthday party, smiling, happy, innocent, everything Lydia fought to preserve, everything that made the hiding worthwhile. She touched the photo. I'm sorry, baby. I tried to keep you separate from all this. But separation was an illusion. You couldn't split yourself into pieces and expect them not to bleed into each other. Staff Sergeant Brennan and civilian Lydia weren't two different people. They were the same person wearing different masks, and one of those masks was about to crack wide open. The next 2 weeks passed in a haze of dread and second-guessing. Lydia worked her shifts on autopilot, came home to Scarlett, made breakfast, helped with homework, did laundry, paid bills, the ordinary rhythm of ordinary life. But underneath it all, anxiety built like storm clouds gathering on a horizon. Scarlett noticed on day 3, they were sitting at the kitchen table, Scarlett working on a book report about Helen Keller, Lydia staring at her laptop screen without seeing it. Mom, you're doing the thing again. Lydia blinked. What thing, Harman? The thing where you're here but you're not here, like your brain is somewhere else. Scarlett put down her pencil, fixed Lydia with eyes too knowing for 10 years old. Are you scared of something? The question hit too close. Lydia closed the laptop, focused on her daughter, this brilliant, perceptive child who deserved better than a mother who woke up screaming and flinched at fireworks and couldn't talk about the 7 years before Scarlett was born. I have to go to a thing, Lydia said carefully, a Marine thing. Scarlett's eyes went wide. You hush a Marine. The words hung in the air. All the years of avoiding this conversation, all the times Lydia had deflected questions about her shoulder scar, about why she kept a box in the closet she never opened, about why certain sounds made her freeze. A long time ago, before you. Why didn't you tell me? Not accusatory, just curious, hurt underneath. Lydia struggled to find words that would make sense. How do you explain to a 10-year-old that you'd tried to bury an entire identity, that you'd wanted to be just mom? Not warrior, mom, who'd seen friends die and done things that haunted her dreams. Because I wanted to be just your mom, not Marine mom or soldier mom, just mom. Scarlett was quiet for a long moment, processing with that particular seriousness children have when adults let them glimpse the complicated truth. Can I see pictures? Lydia hesitated, the box in the closet. The photographs of ghosts. The evidence of a person who'd ceased to exist when she'd signed discharge papers. But Scarlett deserved to know, deserved to understand who her mother had been before motherhood. She stood, went to the bedroom, came back with a single photograph. Not the one from Fallujah with the 4 Marines who were mostly dead now, but her service photo. Dress blues, staff sergeant chevrons, 24 years old and thinking she was invincible. Scarlett took the photo with careful hands, studied it like an artifact from ancient history. You look like a superhero. Lydia laughed. It came out bitter. I wasn't. Trust me, baby. Did you save people? The question stabbed through every defense Lydia had built. Did you save people? Yes and no. 3 Marines in Fallujah who'd lived because she'd run through enemy fire. 3 others who'd died despite everything she'd done. Lance Corporal Reeves who'd made it home only to eat a bullet in his parents' basement. Sometimes I did, sometimes I couldn't. That's the hard part about being a medic. You can't save everyone. Scarlett handed back the photograph. I think it's cool that you were a Marine, that you saved people. She paused. You can be both, you know. Marine and mom, they don't cancel each other out. Out of the mouths of children. Simple wisdom delivered without the weight of all the reasons it felt impossible. Maybe you're right. That night at work, Lydia's carefully constructed separation started crumbling. 3:47 a.m. A young soldier came through the doors. Training accident at Quantico. Gunshot wound to the abdomen. Critical. The similarity to Fallujah was too close. Too sharp. Lydia was helping prep him for surgery when it hit. Not a flashback exactly. More like existing in 2 timelines simultaneously. The emergency room and the Humvee. The fluorescent lights and the desert sun. The beeping monitors and the sound of mortars falling. She froze. Hands hovering over the soldier's abdomen. Mind trapped between present and past. The Humvee. Corporal Jennifer Dawson. Shrapnel through her chest. Blood everywhere. Lydia's hands working while the world exploded around them. Stay with me, Marine. Don't you dare quit on me. Brennan and Doctor. Whitaker's voice cut through the fog. I need you here. She snapped back. Present reasserted itself. Her hands moved automatically. Training taking over when conscious thought failed. They stabilized the kid. Got him to surgery. Saved his life. But after in the locker room, Lydia's hands wouldn't stop shaking. She sat on the bench and stared at them. These hands that had saved lives and held the dying. That had pulled triggers and applied pressure to severed arteries. That couldn't escape what they'd learned to do in that Humvee 7 years ago. Dr. Whitaker found her 20 minutes later. You froze in there. For about 5 seconds. I've never seen you freeze. Lydia looked up at him. 6 years they'd worked together. 7 years, actually. 7 years, and she'd never told him anything real about her past. Never mentioned Iraq or Fallujah or the reason she knew combat medicine better than most trauma surgeons. I'm fine. You're not fine. And that's okay. He sat beside her on the bench. Didn't crowd, just present. Whatever happened to you before you came here, whatever you're carrying, it's affecting your work, and that means it's affecting patients. It was one moment, one freeze. I recovered. This time, he paused. Look, I saw the video from the supermarket. Everyone did. You doing CPR on that general. The ceremony that's apparently happening in 2 weeks. Lydia's head snapped up. How did you know about the ceremony? The general's office called the hospital, asked about your character, your work ethic, whether you deserved recognition. Whitaker smiled slightly. I told them you were the best trauma nurse I'd ever worked with, that patients request you by name, that you stay late without being asked and come in early on your days off. Her throat tightened. You didn't have to do that. Yeah, I did because it's true. He stood. Whatever's happening in 2 weeks, whatever they're recognizing you for, you earned it. Don't let the past convince you otherwise. He left before she could respond. Lydia sat alone in the locker room, the Bronze Star ceremony looming, the past and present colliding in ways she couldn't control. She pulled out her phone, opened the photo app, found the picture buried in a folder she rarely accessed. 4 Marines, Fallujah 2014. Heat and dust and exhaustion that had become baseline after 7 months in country. Lieutenant Marcus Webb, killed by sniper fire outside Mosul 2015. Corporal Jennifer Dawson, died in Lydia's arms from shrapnel wounds 2014. Lance Corporal Tommy Reeves, survived the war, killed himself 2 years later. Staff Sergeant Lydia Brennan, the only one still breathing. She stared at their faces, remembered their voices, their laughs, the way they trusted her to keep them alive. "I tried," she whispered to the ghosts. "I tried so hard." But 3 out of 4 dead meant she'd failed more than she'd succeeded. Meant the medal Nathaniel wanted to give her was built on a foundation of corpses and survivors' guilt. She almost called him, almost said she couldn't come, that the ceremony was a mistake, that she didn't deserve recognition for doing her job. But Marines don't run, even when running would be easier. The morning of the ceremony arrived cold and gray. October weather that felt like a warning. Lydia stood in her bedroom at 7 a.m., having slept maybe 3 hours in restless fits. The closet door was open, the box on the bed. Inside her dress blues in their plastic dry cleaning bag, untouched for 7 years. She could wear them. Had every right. The ceremony was at a Marine facility. Dress blues would be appropriate, expected even. But wearing the uniform felt like claiming an identity she wasn't sure belonged to her anymore. Like putting on someone else's skin and pretending it fit. She chose civilian clothes, black slacks, charcoal blouse. Professional, appropriate, the uniform of someone who used to be something else but wasn't anymore. As she closed the box, her fingers brushed the smaller case inside. The one with her medals, Combat Action Ribbon, Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal, Purple Heart from when the Humvee rolled and pins went into her shoulder. 7 years and she'd never worn them. Never registered with the VA. Never walked into a veterans event announcing what she'd done and where she'd been. But today felt different. Today felt like maybe she needed proof of who she'd been. Evidence that Staff Sergeant Brennan had existed even if she didn't anymore. She took the medals out, held them, the weight insignificant in her palm but somehow crushing. Put them in her purse, just in case. Scarlett appeared in the doorway already dressed, jeans and her favorite purple shirt. Hair brushed, eyes bright with excitement Lydia couldn't match. "You look nice, Mom." "Thanks, baby." Lydia tried to smile, failed, settled for not crying instead. "Can I come with you?" The question Lydia had been dreading. "Not this time. It's a military thing. Lots of boring speeches. You'd hate it." Scarlett's face fell. "But I want to see you get honored." "There's nothing to honor, baby. I'm just going to say thank you to the man I helped. That's all." But Scarlett's eyes said she knew there was more to it. That Mom was lying. That something important was happening, and Scarlett was being excluded from it. Lydia knelt down, pulled her daughter into a hug. "I promise I'll tell you everything when I get home." "Okay. Okay," small voice, uncertain. "Mrs. Chen is going to watch you. I'll be back by dinner time. Then we can make pizza, and you can tell me if Helen Keller was actually cool or just someone teachers make you read about." That got a small laugh. She was definitely cool. "Did you know she met 12 presidents?" "I did not know that." They held each other for another moment, Lydia memorizing the feeling, the weight of her daughter in her arms, the reason she'd walked away from the Marines, the reason she worked nights and lived in a too-small apartment and pushed through PTSD without medication. Everything she did was for Scarlett, including facing the past she'd tried to bury. The drive to Arlington took 45 minutes. Lydia spent most of it gripping the steering wheel hard enough to make her knuckles white, breathing exercises from the VA counselor she'd seen twice before deciding therapy wasn't for her. 1:38 p.m., 22 minutes early because Marines are never late, because punctuality is burned into your DNA even 7 years after discharge. The Marine Corps Reserve Center looked exactly like every other military facility Lydia had ever been on. Utilitarian buildings, parade ground, flags snapping in cold wind, the architecture of function over form. She pulled into the parking lot, found a space, sat in her car watching other vehicles arrive, veterans with plates that advertised their service, active duty in uniform, families in Sunday best, all walking toward the main building with the confidence of people who belonged. Lydia didn't belong. Not anymore. She was a civilian nurse, a single mom, someone who'd left this world behind. She could leave, could start the car and drive away. Call Nathaniel later with apologies and excuses. But Marines don't run. She forced herself out of the car, locked it, walked toward the entrance on legs that felt disconnected from conscious control. The building loomed, eagle globe and anchor emblem above the entrance, polished brass catching weak October sunlight. The symbols of everything she'd been and lost and couldn't reconcile. She passed Marines in dress blues. Uniforms perfect, shoes mirror bright. Bearing that came from years of discipline. Some nodded to her, small acknowledgments of something they recognized even in civilian clothes. The auditorium where the ceremony would be held was massive. High ceilings, rows of folding chairs, stage draped in red and gold, flags positioned with geometric precision. 500 people were already there, maybe more, veterans in active duty and families. The low murmur of conversation filling space like radio static. Lydia stood at the entrance, paralyzed, overwhelmed, every instinct screaming to turn around and run. Before she could move, an older man approached, 70s, Vietnam veteran cap, weathered face that had seen things civilians couldn't imagine. "You're Lydia Brennan." Not a question, a statement. She froze. "How did you know word travels?" He extended his hand. When she took it, he held on, grip warm and firm. "Thank you for your service, Marine. What you did for General Blackwood, what you've done with your life, we heard. It's an honor." Lydia couldn't speak, throat too tight, eyes burning. More veterans approached, one after another, shaking her hand, thanking her, looking at her with respect that felt unearned and overwhelming. A young Marine in dress blues appeared, Lance Corporal, 22, maybe 23. "Ma'am, General Blackwood requested you be seated in the front row, if you'll follow me." She followed in a daze. Down the center aisle, every eye tracking her movement, whispered conversations falling silent as she passed. The front row was reserved, nameplates on chairs. She found hers between a colonel and a retired sergeant major, both in dress blues, both with ribbons that told stories of decades of service. They stood when she approached, came to attention. The colonel extended his hand. "Staff Sergeant Brennan, it's an honor." "I'm not active duty anymore, sir." "Once a Marine, always a Marine, ma'am." The sergeant major's voice was gravel and absolute certainty. Lydia sat because standing felt impossible. The colonel and sergeant major flanked her, protective, like guards watching over something precious. The auditorium filled. 500 became 600. The energy building, something important about to happen. Lights dimmed, conversations quieted. The crowd settled with military discipline. Color Guard marched in, 4 Marines, 4 flags, movement so precise it looked choreographed but was just years of practice. The entire room rose. Lydia stood with them, hand over heart, muscle memory stronger than conscious thought. The national anthem played, 600 voices, some singing, some silent, all present in a way that transcended mere patriotism. Lydia stood and felt tears threatening. Not from flag-waving nationalism, from being surrounded by people who understood something fundamental about service and sacrifice. The anthem ended. Color Guard posted flags, marched off. The ceremony began. Announcements, introductions, formal proceedings that felt familiar and foreign. Then General Nathaniel Blackwood walked onto the stage. 600 people rose, applause building like thunder. But Nathaniel's eyes weren't scanning the crowd. They locked on Lydia sitting front row with tears already streaming down her face. And she finally understood. This ceremony wasn't about awards for active duty, wasn't about recent deployments. This ceremony was about her. The realization hit like an explosion. Her vision tunneled, hands gripped the chair. 600 witnesses, a 4-star general, all of this for her. She wanted to run, wanted to disappear, but she was trapped between the colonel and sergeant major with nowhere to go. Nathaniel stood at the podium, dress blues perfect, 4 stars catching stage lights. When he spoke, his voice carried authority earned over 4 decades. 3 months ago, I went to the supermarket to buy groceries. The audience went silent. I made it to the cereal aisle before my heart stopped beating. Lydia's hands shook. She laced her fingers to hide it. I don't remember the collapse. Don't remember hitting the floor. Don't remember anything until I woke 3 days later and was told that if CPR had started 60 seconds later, I would be dead. He paused. Let the word land. Dead. The paramedics said a bystander performed CPR, perfect technique, then disappeared before they could get her name. He described the search, security footage, phone calls, dead ends. The audience leaned forward, drawn into the mystery. Then a witness came forward, told me the woman doing CPR had said 4 words that changed everything. Nathaniel's voice dropped, intimate despite the microphone. Stay with me, Marine. Don't you dare quit on me. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, Marines recognizing the language. That's not civilian speak, Nathaniel continued. That's what we say to each other when everything's falling apart and the only thing keeping someone alive is another Marine refusing to let go. His voice strengthened. When I heard those words, I knew. The woman who saved me was one of us. He pulled paper from his pocket, unfolded it. Staff Sergeant Lydia Marie Brennan, United States Marine Corps, 2010 to 2017. Combat medic. 2 tours Iraq. 600 heads turned toward Lydia. Nathaniel read her record. Fallujah, the ambush. 3 Marines down. Lydia running through enemy fire, working on casualties while bullets sparked off rocks. She received a combat action ribbon for that. His voice was quiet now, reverent. She never wore it. The auditorium went silent. In 2016, her vehicle rolled outside Ramadi, dislocated shoulder, fractured ribs, medical discharge with honors. He folded the paper. She came home, enrolled her daughter in school, became a night shift nurse, never talked about her service, never sought recognition, just moved on to the next mission, like Marines do, voice growing stronger. 7 years later, all that training came back. She didn't hesitate. She saw a man dying and instinct took over. He looked at Lydia, eyes wet. The Corps trained us both, Staff Sergeant. Trained us to fight when others freeze. That day in the supermarket, everything the Corps taught you saved my life. The applause started, not polite, explosive. 600 people on their feet, the sound deafening. Lydia sat frozen, tears streaming, unable to process. The world narrowing to this moment of exposure. And through it all, Nathaniel Blackwood stood on stage looking at her with something beyond gratitude. With recognition of a fellow warrior who'd kept fighting long after the uniform came off. The applause didn't stop. It built and built, wave after wave, crashing against the walls of the auditorium until the sound became physical pressure. 600 people on their feet, voices joining the thunder. Marines shouting, "Ura!" Veterans saluting with tears streaming down faces marked by wars Lydia was too young to remember. She sat paralyzed, every eye on her, every person in that massive space witnessing her complete exposure. 7 years of hiding stripped away in front of the strangers who suddenly knew everything about who she'd been and what she'd done and why her hands sometimes shook when helicopters flew overhead. The colonel beside her leaned close. "Breathe, Marine, you've got this." But she didn't have this. Didn't have anything except the overwhelming need to disappear. General Nathaniel Blackwood stood at the podium waiting, patient, like he had all the time in the world, like he knew she needed a moment to process before he could continue. Finally, he raised his hand. Small gesture. Commanding. The applause died gradually, people settling back into seats. The silence that followed felt heavier than the noise. Nathaniel's voice when he spoke again was quieter, more personal, like he was talking to Lydia alone even though 600 people listened. "When I found out who she was, when I read her service record and understood the caliber of person who'd saved my life, I knew a phone call wouldn't be enough. A letter wouldn't be enough. Nothing conventional could possibly express what her actions meant." He paused, let the words settle, because what Staff Sergeant Brennan did on that supermarket floor wasn't separate from her service in uniform. It was the continuation of it. The proof that service doesn't end when you hang up your dress blues. It transforms, it endures, it becomes cellular. A young Marine aide appeared from stage left carrying a wooden presentation case, the kind used for ceremonial flags or weapons, the kind that holds things too important for cardboard. Nathaniel took it with both hands, held it like it contained something sacred. Lydia's heart stopped. She knew what was in that case. Had known since the moment she saw it, but knowing didn't make breathing any easier. "For 33 years, Nathaniel said, opening the case, I've carried a reminder of who I was supposed to be, a physical representation of the values we all swear to uphold." Inside the case pinned to blue velvet was a bronze star. The metal caught stage lights, red, white, and blue ribbon, bronze star surrounded by smaller stars. 4th highest military decoration, given for heroic service in combat. Gasps rippled through the audience. They knew what this was, knew what it meant, knew that generals didn't give away their bronze stars. Nathaniel lifted the medal from the case. His hands were steady despite the emotion in his voice. "I earned this in Desert Storm, 1991, for leading my Marines through an ambush that should have killed every one of us." He paused. "I've worn it at every major event since. Change of command ceremonies, retirement dinners, funerals for brothers who didn't make it home." His voice thickened. "This medal has represented my finest hour as a Marine, the moment I was most tested and didn't break." He looked directly at Lydia. "Until 3 months ago." The audience leaned forward, waiting. "This medal represents honor, courage, and commitment. Not just words we say, real things, living things that define who we are when everything else is stripped away." Nathaniel held the bronze star in both hands. Staff Sergeant Lydia Brennan embodied every one of those values on a supermarket floor. She honored her oath 7 years after discharge, showed courage by running toward crisis when everyone else froze, demonstrated commitment to a stranger whose only connection to her was the uniform he used to wear. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. The acoustics carried it to every corner. For 33 years, this medal has defined who I was, what I accomplished, the Marine I tried to be. Long pause. But you, Staff Sergeant, you embody what this medal was created to honor. Not just courage in combat, courage in silence, service without recognition, duty that doesn't end when the uniform comes off. He began removing the bronze star from his own uniform, the small mechanical sound of metal separating from fabric, possibly loud in the silence. This belongs to you now. You earned it. The words fell like stones into still water. Nathaniel held the medal, looked at it for a long moment. 33 years of service compressed into metal and ribbon. Then he raised his eyes to Lydia. Staff Sergeant Lydia Brennan, would you please come to the stage? Not a request, an order, delivered with the full weight of 4 stars and 4 decades of command. Lydia's legs didn't work. She sat frozen, hands gripping chair arms, every muscle locked. This wasn't supposed to happen. She wasn't supposed to be honored. She'd just done her job. Just used training that cost 3 friends their lives to teach her. The colonel beside her stood, extended his hand. Time to face it, Marine. No running. She took his hand, let him pull her to her feet. Her legs trembled, the bad shoulder throbbed. But she stood. The walk from front row to stage felt infinite. Each step measured, deliberate. Her feet finding floor with muscle memory from drill practice she hadn't done in 7 years. People watched her pass, some crying openly. Veterans who understood what this moment meant. Active duty, seeing proof that service continues. Civilians witnessing something important they couldn't fully comprehend. She climbed the steps, each one higher than it should be, reached the stage, stood before General Nathaniel Blackwood, this man whose life she'd saved without knowing who he was or caring about rank or medals or any of it. Up close, she could see the cost of 71 years, the lines in his face, the scar above his left eyebrow, the slight tremor in his hands from recent cardiac surgery. But his eyes were steady, clear. Looking at her was something that felt dangerously close to pride. Nathaniel spoke quietly, meant for her, but the microphones caught it anyway. My wife Eleanor is sitting in the 3rd row. She wanted to thank you personally. After this is over, she'll find you. Lydia hadn't thought about his family, about the wife who'd almost become a widow in a cereal aisle, about grandchildren who'd almost lost someone important. You didn't just save me, Nathaniel continued. You saved my family from losing someone they love. That's worth more than any medal I can ever. He held up the bronze star. But this is what I can give. Turn around. She obeyed. Muscle memory turned her back to the audience, 600 people watching. Nathaniel's hands lifted the ribbon over her head. She felt it settle around her neck. The medal coming to rest against her chest, right over her heart. The weight of it. That's what struck her. Not heavy in pounds, heavy in history. In 33 years against Nathaniel's chest. In every ceremony where he looked down at it and remembered who he was supposed to be. The medal was warm, body heat from 3 decades. That detail shattered something inside her. This piece of his identity, now hers. This symbol of everything they both believed in, transferred like a torch being passed. Nathaniel's hands rested briefly on her shoulders, steadying. Then he turned her gently to face the audience. 600 people rose as one. The applause that erupted wasn't just sound, it was validation, recognition. 600 voices saying, yes, this is what service looks like. Marines shouting, veterans saluting, the retired sergeant major from the front row crying openly. This man who'd probably buried too many friends undone by witnessing honor given to someone who'd never asked for it. Lydia's vision blurred, tears she couldn't stop. She tried to stand straight, tried to maintain bearing, but her knees buckled. Nathaniel caught her, arms strong despite age and damaged heart. He held her while she broke, while 7 years of holding everything together finally cracked under the weight of being seen. Thank you, she whispered against his uniform, the words pathetically inadequate. No Marine, his voice rough in her ear. Thank you, for my life, for showing us what we're supposed to be, for never quitting even when quitting would have been easier. The ovation continued, seemed eternal. Lydia stayed in Nathaniel's arms until her legs would support weight again, until she could breathe without sobbing. When she finally stepped back, wiped her face with shaking hands, Nathaniel was smiling through his own tears. But he raised his hand for quiet. The crowd settled reluctantly, the energy still crackling through the air. There's one more thing. Lydia's stomach dropped. One more thing. How could there possibly be more? When I found Staff Sergeant Brennan, I didn't just read her service record. I made additional calls. Nathaniel's voice carried across the silent auditorium. I contacted Northern Virginia Medical Center, spoke to her supervisors, her colleagues, the doctors who work alongside her every night. Oh God, her coworkers knew. Dr. Whitaker, the nursing staff, all of them aware now that she'd been hiding. Do you know what every single person told me? Nathaniel looked at the audience. That she's the best trauma nurse in that emergency room. That patients request her by name. That she stays late without being asked. Comes in early on her days off when they're short-staffed. Fights for people who can't fight for themselves. He turned to Lydia. One doctor said Lydia Brennan has saved more lives in our ER than I can count. She does it with the same calm under pressure she probably showed on that supermarket floor. She's exceptional. Lydia wanted the floor to open up. This public exposure of her civilian life merging with her military past in ways she'd spent 7 years preventing. This woman works night shifts, Nathaniel continued, so she can be home when her daughter gets off school. She makes barely enough to cover rent and childcare in one of the most expensive areas of the country. Lives in a 2-bedroom apartment that takes most of her paycheck. He paused, let the information land. And in 7 years, she's never complained, never asked for recognition, never stopped being exactly what the Marine Corps taught her to be. Excellent, dedicated, selfless. Another pause, building to something. So I made one final call, to the Marine Corps Scholarship Foundation. Lydia's heart stopped. She knew, could see it in his face. They've agreed to establish a scholarship fund. Nathaniel's voice was thick now, barely holding together. In your name, Staff Sergeant, for your daughter Scarlett, full ride, any school she gets into, undergraduate and graduate programs. Everything. The words didn't process at first. Scholarship, Scarlett, full ride. The pieces refused to connect. Then they did. Her daughter. Her 10-year-old daughter who deserved better than night shifts and tight budgets, and a mother who couldn't afford to break down because there was no safety net. Scarlett would have a chance, a real chance. College without crushing debt, graduate school if she wanted, a future not limited by money. Lydia's legs gave out completely. She went down, knees hitting stage floor hard enough to hurt, hands coming up to cover her face, sobs tearing from her throat in sounds she'd never made before. The crowd erupted, not just applause, shouting, crying. 600 people witnessing pure human emotion, the kind that transcends military bearing and protocol. Nathaniel knelt beside her, this 71-year-old man with a surgically repaired heart getting down on the stage floor. You've given enough, he said quietly, meant only for her, though microphones probably caught it. You've sacrificed enough. It's time someone took care of you the way you've taken care of everyone else. Lydia couldn't speak, could only sob while the Bronze Star hung heavy around her neck, and 600 strangers became witnesses to her complete undoing. Eventually, hands helped her up. Nathaniel on one side, the Marine aide on the other. She stood on shaking legs, face wet, mascara ruined, not caring. The ovation continued, people pressing forward, wanting to touch her, to shake her hand, to be part of this moment. Nathaniel kept his arm around her shoulders, one Marine supporting another. You did good, Staff Sergeant, he said. You did real good. The ceremony concluded. Formal closing remarks Lydia barely heard, color guard retiring the flags, the crowd slowly dispersing. But people kept approaching, one after another, an endless stream of gratitude and recognition. An elderly woman grabbed both Lydia's hands. My son was a Marine, Iraq 2007. Didn't make it home. Her voice broke. Knowing there were people like you over there taking care of our boys. She couldn't finish. Just squeezed Lydia's hands and walked away crying. A young Marine, fresh-faced and nervous, approached. Ma'am, I ship to boot camp next month. This ceremony, what the general said about you, it's why I enlisted. Thank you for showing us what right looks like. They kept coming, stories and tears and handshakes that lasted too long. Through it all, Nathaniel stayed close, not hovering, just present, running interference when someone got too intense. After 45 minutes, the crowd thinned enough that Lydia could breathe. A woman approached, 70, silver hair, kind face marked by years of worry. She moved with quiet dignity. Staff Sergeant Brennan, I'm Eleanor Blackwood, Nate's wife. Lydia straightened. Ma'am, I'm so glad he's okay. Eleanor pulled her into a hug, unexpected, warm. You gave me more time with the man I've loved for 47 years. How do I possibly thank you for that? You don't have to. I know I don't have to, but I'm going to anyway. Eleanor pulled back, held Lydia at arm's length. You're coming to dinner. Next Sunday. No arguments. I want you to meet our daughters and grandchildren. The family that still has their father and grandfather because of you. Ma'am, I don't think it's Eleanor, and I wasn't asking. She smiled. Marines aren't the only ones who know how to give orders that aren't really requests. Despite everything, Lydia laughed. Yes, ma'am. Eleanor. Good. Nate will give you our address. Eleanor squeezed her hands once more. Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. She walked away before Lydia could respond. Nathaniel appeared at her elbow. My wife doesn't take no for an answer. 47 years taught me that. She seems wonderful. She is, and she's right. You should meet the family. Let them thank you properly. Lydia nodded, too overwhelmed to argue. Nathaniel guided her to a quiet hallway, just the two of them and the aide standing at respectful distance. How are you holding up? Lydia laughed. It came out slightly hysterical. I have no idea. I think I'm in shock. That's normal. This was a lot. Why? The question burst out. Why did you do all this? The ceremony, the medal, the scholarship. I just did CPR. It's literally my job. Nathaniel pulled out his phone, showed her a photograph. 4 people at a funeral. 3 Marines flanking a flag-draped casket. Nathaniel in the center, younger, maybe 50. Desert Storm, 1991. Staff Sergeant Michael Torres. He pulled me out of a burning vehicle after we hit an IED, saved my life. Died doing it. Lydia looked at the grief on younger Nathaniel's face. I tried to honor him, tried to do something meaningful for his family. But I was just a captain then. Didn't have resources or connections. Nathaniel took the phone back. I've carried that regret for 33 years. The feeling that I never properly honored the man who gave me my life. He looked at her. You gave me my life. And this time I have the resources to do something about it. To make sure you know what it meant. To make sure your daughter has opportunities. To publicly recognize that service doesn't end and Marines don't forget. His voice was firm. So no, it's not too much. It's not nearly enough, but it's what I can do. They stood in silence, 2 warriors separated by 3 decades, but connected by something deeper than age or rank. Thank you, Lydia finally managed, for all of it, for finding me, for the medal, for Scarlett's scholarship, for making me face the part of myself I've been hiding from. You weren't hiding, Nathaniel said gently. You were healing. There's a difference. The aide approached. Sir, there are media crews outside, requesting interviews. Lydia's eyes widened. Media? Someone filmed the ceremony. It's already online, going viral. Nathaniel looked at her. You don't have to talk to them. Lydia thought about staying invisible versus stepping into the light, about what her story might mean to other veterans struggling to reconcile who they'd been with, who they were now. No, I'll do it. If my story helps someone, if it shows that service matters even after you leave, then I should tell it. Nathaniel smiled. There's the Marine I knew was in there. The media scrum was controlled chaos. 4 local news crews, 2 national, several independent journalists. Cameras and microphones and questions shouted over each other. Nathaniel took point, his rank and bearing commanding immediate respect. The chaos organized itself. I'll make a brief statement, then Staff Sergeant Brennan will answer questions. He was concise, factual, outlined the incident, the search, the ceremony. Gave them narrative without the raw emotion of what had happened inside. Then Lydia's turn. Questions came fast. How did you learn CPR? Were you scared? Did you know he was a general? Lydia answered honestly, explained her service, her medical training, the way muscle memory had taken over. The 4 words she'd spoken without thinking that had exposed everything. What will you tell your daughter about today? A female reporter asked. Lydia paused, thought about Scarlett, about the scholarship that would change both their lives. I'll tell her that service doesn't end when you take off the uniform. That the values we swear to uphold, honor, encourage, and commitment, those aren't just words. They're ways of living. She touched the Bronze Star. And I'll tell her she can be anything she wants. That she doesn't have to choose between different versions of herself. That you can be both warrior and mother, both Marine and nurse, both past and present. Cameras captured every word. One last question. Nathaniel interjected, sensing Lydia's exhaustion. Do you regret leaving the Marines? A young reporter asked. Lydia looked at the bronze star around her neck, at Nathaniel standing beside her, at the building full of people who'd stood and applauded. No, I don't regret it. The Corps gave me skills and values I carry every single day. I use them differently now, save lives differently, but I'm still serving. She paused. Once a Marine, always a Marine. That's not just a saying, it's the truth. 3 weeks later, Lydia walked into Northern Virginia Medical Center for her night shift. The Bronze Star wasn't around her neck anymore. That lived in a display case at home where Scarlett could see it, where her daughter had stared at it for an hour the night Lydia came home from the ceremony, asking 100 questions that Lydia finally had answers for. But the medal had been replaced. A small eagle globe and anchor pin, modest, subtle, pinned to her scrub jacket above her name tag. Dr. Whitaker noticed immediately. Is that what I think it is? Yeah. I saw the ceremony online. Everyone did. He paused. I'm sorry I never knew about your service. I didn't want you to know, wanted to keep it separate. And now, Lydia touched the pin. Now I think separation isn't the answer. Integration is. Being all of who I am, not just pieces. The shift started. Motor vehicle accident. Young woman, early 20s, critical injuries. The ER exploded into controlled chaos. Lydia moved into familiar rhythm. But when the patient started crashing, when the young resident began panicking, Lydia's voice cut through with command authority from someplace deeper than 7 years of night shifts. Step back. Let me work. The resident obeyed, not because Lydia was senior, because something in her voice demanded it. She stabilized the patient. Used techniques learned in Humvees and field hospitals. Kept someone alive who should have died. After, in the quiet of 3 a.m., the resident approached. How did you know what to do? When everything was falling apart, you just took control. Lydia looked at the young doctor, 26, smart and skilled, but lacking the one thing medical school can't teach. I learned it in a different kind of emergency room. One where the patients were Marines and the OR was whatever space we could clear in a combat zone. The resident's eyes widened. You're the one, from the video, the Marine who saved General Blackwood. I'm a nurse who saved a patient. The Marine thing is just context. But that wasn't quite true anymore. She was both, Marine and nurse, warrior and healer, past and present integrated into something whole. 1 week later, Gunnery Sergeant Maria Rodriguez called from the Marine recruiting office. Staff Sergeant Brennan, we'd like you to speak to potential recruits, young women considering medical specialties. Just share your story. No recruiting pitch, just honest testimony. Lydia's first instinct was to refuse. But then she thought about the ceremony, about 600 people standing, about the responsibility that came with recognition. When do you need me? Saturday morning. 15 young women, ages 18 to 24, all considering enlistment, all looking at Lydia with hope that felt like pressure. She stood before them, Bronze Star pinned to her shirt because they'd asked her to wear it. I'm not going to lie to you. The Marine Corps will change your life, make you stronger than you thought possible, give you skills and confidence and purpose that's hard to find anywhere else. She paused, chose words carefully. But it'll also take things, friends, innocence, sometimes pieces of your soul. You'll see things you can't unsee, do things you can't undo, come home different than you left. The young women shifted. This wasn't the recruiting pitch they'd expected. I lost 3 members of my fire team. 2 died in Iraq. 1 made it home and killed himself 2 years after his honorable discharge. Heavy silence. So why am I telling you to consider enlisting? Because despite everything I've lost, despite the nightmares and the PTSD and the shoulder that'll never work right, I'd do it all over again. She touched the Bronze Star. Because the Corps taught me who I could be. And 7 years after I left, when a man collapsed in a supermarket, all that training came back. I saved his life without thinking. Because once you're a Marine, you're always a Marine. Questions came, honest ones, hard ones. Were you scared? Every day. Fear doesn't mean you're weak. Acting despite fear means you're strong. How do you deal with losing people? Lydia was quiet for a long moment. You don't deal with it, you carry it, but you learn to make the weight mean something. You honor them by being the person they trusted you to be. Would you do it again? The quietest girl in back, barely 18. Lydia looked at her, saw herself at that age. Yes, knowing everything I know now, yes. Because it made me who I am, and who I am saved a life when it mattered most. The recruiting officer reported that all 15 requested additional sessions. 3 eventually enlisted. One became a combat medic following Lydia's path. 6 months after the ceremony, Lydia sat in the hospital cafeteria at 2 a.m. coffee cold, the eagle globe and anchor pin on her scrubs. General Nathaniel Blackwood sat across from her. He'd started visiting monthly, always bringing coffee for night at shift. They'd become friends the way people who've saved each other's lives become friends. How's Scarlett? Excited about the scholarship. Already talking about colleges, even though she's only 10. Lydia smiled. She told her class she wants to be a Marine like her mom. And how do you feel about that? Proud and scared, but mostly proud. Comfortable silence. Two warriors separated by generations but connected by something deeper. I got a call yesterday, Nathaniel said. From Captain Austin Whitmore. Lydia's head snapped up. Whitmore, Corporal Whitmore, the Marine you saved in Fallujah, 2014. Lydia's hands started shaking. She put down her coffee. He's alive. Very much so. Captain now. Married. Twin daughters. Nathaniel paused. He saw the ceremony video, recognized you, asked if I could arrange a meeting. 13 years. 13 years wondering if the corporal whose femoral artery she'd held pressure on for 18 minutes had survived. He wants to see me. He's here in the hospital. I may have arranged for him to be in the lobby. Lydia stood so fast her chair scraped tile. Now, if you're ready, she wasn't ready, would never be ready, but she followed Nathaniel anyway. The man in the lobby was older than she remembered. Lines in his face, gray at temples, but the same eyes. He saw her and froze, then walked forward slowly. Staff Sergeant Brennan. Corporal Whitmore. Her voice broke on his rank. Captain now, but I'll always be the corporal you saved. He paused. I have twin daughters, Madison and Emma. They're 8. They wouldn't exist if you hadn't run through enemy fire to reach me. Lydia couldn't speak. I've thought about you every day for 13 years, Austin continued. Wondered who you were, where you went. Then I saw the video, saw you save General Blackwood, and I knew. He pulled her into a hug, both crying in a hospital lobby at 2 a.m. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for my life, for my daughters, for everything. They talked for an hour about Fallujah, about his recovery, about marriage and children, about Lydia's discharge and the 7 years she'd spent trying to be someone else. You saved 4 of us that day, Austin said. 3 casualties and yourself. Because the Marine you were in that Humvee, she saved you too. Kept you from giving up. Lydia thought about that. About Staff Sergeant Brennan saving civilian Lydia. About the warrior preserving the healer. Yeah, I guess she did. 1 year after the supermarket. 1 year after 4 words changed everything. Lydia stood in her kitchen, watching Scarlett work on a school project. Title in careful letters. My hero, photos arranged in rows, Lydia in dress blues, the ceremony. With Captain Whitmore and his daughters. Teaching CPR at the VA. Text in Scarlett's handwriting. My mom was a Marine. She saved people in war. Then she saved a general in a supermarket. She says service never ends. It just changes uniforms. I want to be like her when I grow up. Is it okay? Scarlett asked. Mrs. Patterson said we had to write about our hero. It's perfect, baby. I mean it, about wanting to be like you. Scarlett's voice was serious. You're the bravest person I know. Lydia sat beside her daughter, pulled her close. You're my hero too. Moms can't have kids as heroes. That's backwards. Says who? Says logic. Lydia laughed. Logic is overrated. That night, working her shift, a young veteran came in, mid-20s, Iraq, haunted eyes, PTSD eating him alive, convinced his service was meaningless. He saw the pin on her scrubs. You served, yeah, Iraq. 2 tours, combat medic. Then you know, hollow voice. You know it was all for nothing. Lydia sat beside his bed, took his hand. I know it feels that way. I know coming home is harder than being there. I know wondering if it mattered keeps you up at night. She touched the pin. But here's what I learned. Service doesn't end. The person you became, the skills you learned, the values you swore to uphold, those don't disappear. She told him about the supermarket, about muscle memory, about General Blackwood and the ceremony and the scholarship. 1 year ago, I would have told you the same thing, that it didn't matter, that I'd wasted 7 years hiding. But then a man's heart stopped, and everything I learned came back. She squeezed his hand. The moment will come when someone needs the person you became. Maybe tomorrow, maybe in 10 years. But it will come, and you'll be ready, because Marines don't quit. His eyes were wet. You really believe that? I know it, because I lived it. He left 2 hours later, not cured, but with something he hadn't had when he arrived. Hope. Present day. Lydia Brennan stands in the emergency room, the bronze-starred home where Scarlett can see it, the scholarship fund growing, the pin on her scrubs catching light. Another patient asks about it. Another conversation begins. Another seed planted. She tells the story again, about a general in a supermarket in 4 words that changed everything. Stay with me, Marine. The words that exposed what she tried to hide. That connected her to her past. That reminded her who she really is. Once a Marine, always a Marine. Not just a motto, a fundamental truth about identity and service in the way training burns into your DNA. Some warriors never stop fighting. They just change battlefields. Switch from combat zones to emergency rooms, trade rifles for stethoscopes, exchange tactical gear for scrubs. But the mission stays the same. Save lives, refuse to quit. Stay with the people who need you. The monitor beeps. New trauma activation. Automatic doors burst open. Another life hanging in the balance. Lydia moves toward the gurney, hands steady, voice calm. The Bronze Star may be at home, but the values it represents are woven into every choice she makes. Once a Marine, always a Marine. Some identities never fade. Some training never leaves. Some values never die. They wait, patient, ready, for the moment someone needs them. And when that moment comes true, warriors don't hesitate. They run toward danger. They fight for lives worth saving. They refuse to surrender, because that's what Marines do. That's what Lydia Brennan did in a supermarket. What General Nathaniel Blackwood did in a ceremony. What both continue to do every single day, living proof that service never ends. It only transforms. And the ripples spread forever.